The sound of skin cutting through air never came. What came instead was a gasp, sharp, collective, terrified.
How dare you defy me
Ifunanya
like this?
Balagun's
You will
hand
regret
froze
this
mid-swing.
insolence.
Her fingers clenched. Her wrist locked in another grip. The room stiffened. Plates hovered in half-placed positions. A chandelier hummed faintly above polished marble. The house staff stood like statues, their eyes wide, their breaths shallow, because what they were seeing had never happened before. The slap had been stopped. Amarachi Nwoye stood in front of Ifunanya, her small hand wrapped firmly around the woman's wrist. Her shoulders trembled slightly, not from weakness but from the weight of what she had just done. She did not shout. She did not beg. She simply held on. Across the living room, Adekunle Adebayo paused mid-step. He had been walking toward the staircase, distracted by a phone call that no longer mattered. His eyes fixed on the scene with a slow, sinking realization. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a mistake. This was cruelty interrupted. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. I read the comments, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. Ifunanya's face tightened, disbelief hardening into fury. "Let go," she said quietly, the calmness in her voice far more dangerous than a shout. Amarachi did not release her. Her grip remained steady, her chin lifted just enough to show she was still breathing, still present. The room waited. For years, this mansion had learned the rhythm of Ifunanya's anger. A raised voice, a sharp accusation, a slap delivered swiftly and privately enough to leave no witness bold enough to speak. It was an unspoken rule. Endure, survive, collect your pay, and go home. The staff knew the cost of resistance. Silence was safer. But Amarachi had arrived only 2 days ago. She had not yet learned the rhythm. Ifunanya yanked her arm back, finally breaking free.
You will regret
"How
this
dare you
insolence."
touch me?" she snapped, her voice echoing against glass walls. "Do you know who I am?" Amarachi took a step back, her hands dropping to her sides. Her knees threatened to give way, but she held herself upright. "I know you're wrong," she said softly. A murmur rippled through the room before dying instantly. Adekunle felt his chest tighten. Wrong. No one had ever spoken that word aloud in this house. Ifunanya laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "Wrong?" She glanced around, daring anyone to meet her eyes. "You think this is your village? You think you can come here and embarrass me?" Her gaze landed briefly on Adekunle. Something flickered, surprise, calculation, but vanished as quickly as it came. She had not noticed him before. Or maybe she had, and assumed he would look away, as he always did. Adekunle did not look away. He studied Amarachi's face instead. Young, tired, determined. There was fear there, yes, but it sat beneath something stronger. Resolve, the kind that came from having nothing left to lose. Earlier that morning, the cook had warned her in the narrow kitchen corridor. If Madam shouts, "Bow your head." If she lifts her hand, "Close your eyes," it will pass. Amarachi had nodded politely. She had not argued, but something inside her had gone still. Now that stillness anchored her. Ifunanya's voice rose. Security!
Get in
No
here
one
now.
moved. The guards stood by the entrance, eyes darting between their employer's fiancé and the man whose name was on every paycheck. Adekunle felt the weight of their hesitation settle on him. This was no longer about a slap. It was about what he would allow. He cleared his throat. The sound was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "That's enough." Ifunanya turned fully toward him, shock flashing across her face.
"That's enough.
"Kunle," she tried.
Saw this.
"I saw," he said. The words landed heavier than he intended. He had seen, not heard, not been told, seen. For the first time, there was no distance between him and the truth. Amarachi's hands began to shake now that the moment had passed. She clasped them together, pressing her fingers into her palms. She waited for punishment. It had to come. Every story she knew ended that way. Ifunanya inhaled sharply, forcing composure. She's new. She doesn't understand boundaries. Adekunle's eyes did not leave Amarachi. What was she accused of? A pause. Ifunanya's lips pressed into a thin line. My bracelet is missing. The air shifted. Everyone knew this pattern. Something misplaced. Someone blamed. A release for bottled rage. Amarachi swallowed. I didn't take anything, she said. I swear. Her voice cracked on the last word. Adekunle felt something twist painfully in his chest. He remembered his mother's voice, years ago, insisting on honesty in a world that rewarded silence. Ifunanya scoffed. Of course you'd say that. Adekunle raised a hand slightly. We'll find the bracelet, he said. Without violence. The word hung there, undeniable. Ifunanya stared at him, as though seeing him for the first time. You're choosing her side? Adekunle hesitated. Not because he doubted what was right, but because he was beginning to understand what it would cost. Choosing meant breaking something. Perhaps everything. I'm choosing decency, he said finally. The room exhaled. Ifunanya's jaw tightened. She said nothing more. Instead, she turned and walked away, heels striking the floor with measured fury. The staff parted instinctively to let her pass. Amarachi remained where she was, legs weak, heart pounding. Adekunle approached her slowly. You're not in trouble, he said, though he wasn't sure that was true. She nodded, tears finally spilling over. I just didn't want another one. Another what? He wondered. As she was led gently out of the room by the housekeeper, Adekunle stood alone in the silence she left behind. Something irreversible had happened. Not because a hand was stopped, but because he had not stopped it himself. And for the first time, he realized the house had been quiet for years, not because there was peace, but because everyone was afraid to speak. That realization followed him as he climbed the stairs, heavy and unwelcome, knowing deep down that nothing in this mansion would ever return to the way it was. The mansion did not return to its normal rhythm after that morning. It pretended to. Doors still opened softly. Cutlery still clinked against porcelain. The air conditioning still hummed with mechanical obedience. But beneath the polished calm, something had shifted, like a crack spreading quietly under glass. Ifunanya Balogun noticed it first. She sat before her vanity that evening, watching her own reflection with narrowed eyes. The bracelet lay beside her makeup tray, exactly where it had always been. She had found it an hour after the confrontation, tucked behind a velvet box. She had not told anyone. Admitting that would mean admitting something else, that her anger had chosen a target before truth had a chance. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. This had never happened before, not like this. No maid had ever dared to look her in the eye, let alone stop her hand. And Kunle Adekunle had seen it. Worse, he had spoken. Downstairs, Amarachi moved carefully through the servants' quarters, aware of every whisper that followed her. Some looked at her with admiration they tried to hide, others with fear. One wrong move, and she could lose this job. She knew that. But there was also a strange calm inside her, the kind that came after crossing a line you could never uncross. She paused. Her mother's face surfaced in her mind, thin, tired, smiling anyway. Amarachi had promised herself she would survive this city, no matter how loud or cruel it became. She had not planned on bravery. It had simply happened. Adekunle spent the night restless. He lay awake in his room, replaying the scene over and over. The way Ifunanya's hand had been raised so naturally. The way Amarachi had not flinched. The ease with which violence had almost occurred. He had always known Ifunanya was demanding, strong-willed, particular. He had called it confidence. Perhaps he had needed to. By morning, the unease followed him down the staircase. The staff greeted him with unusual attentiveness, eyes lingering just long enough to show expectation. They were watching him now. At breakfast, Ifunanya appeared composed, her voice light, her laughter controlled. She spoke about wedding plans, about guests arriving from Abuja, about fabric choices and seating arrangements. Anyone listening would think nothing was wrong. Adekunle listened, but he watched. When she reached across the table to touch his hand, he noticed the tension in her fingers, the careful performance of affection. It felt rehearsed. A car pulled into the compound mid-morning, unannounced. The sound of its engine carried across the courtyard, drawing curious glances. Adekunle looked up from his tablet just as the gate opened. Mama Sade stepped out. She was older now, her posture still upright, her presence undeniable. She wore simple clothes, no jewelry, no pretense. Her eyes swept the house with practiced ease, seeing far more than decor and wealth. Ifunanya froze. The smile slid from her face before she could stop it. "Mama Sade?" she said, standing abruptly. "You didn't say you were coming?" Mama Sade did not smile back. "I was nearby," she replied calmly, "and I heard something that troubled me." Her gaze moved to Adekunle, assessing, measuring. Then it returned to Ifunanya. They stood in silence for a moment. "This house is too quiet," Mama Sade said finally. "That's never a good sign." Ifunanya forced a laugh. "You always say strange things." Mama Sade stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This is how it started the last time." The words were soft, but they landed with weight. Adekunle felt a chill travel down his spine. Last time. The phrase suggested a history he did not know, one that had consequences. Ifunanya's eyes flashed. "We're fine." Mama Sade shook her head slightly. "That's what you said before." She turned then, her attention shifting toward the hallway that led to the servants' quarters. Her gaze paused, thoughtful. Adekunle followed it, his unease deepening. Amarachi was sweeping the corridor when Mama Sade approached. Their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or intuition. Mama Sade nodded once, slowly. "Good morning," she said. Amarachi bowed her head respectfully. "Good morning, Ma." Mama Sade studied her a moment longer. "You're new." "Yes, Ma? And you still stand straight." Amarachi did not know what to say to that. Mama Sade moved on without explanation, leaving a strange warmth in her wake. Later that afternoon, Adekunle sought out Mama Sade in the garden. "You said something earlier," he began carefully. "About the last time." Mama Sade looked at him for a long moment. "Some stories are not mine to tell," she said. "But some silences are dangerous." "Is Ifunanya in danger?" he asked. Mama Sade sighed. "No, but others might be, if nothing changes." That night, the mansion received another visitor. The guards announced him hesitantly. "Sir, there's a man at the gate. He says his name is Chinedu Okorie." Adekunle frowned. The name meant nothing to him. "What does he want?" He says he's looking for someone." Ifunanya, standing nearby, went pale. Adekunle noticed. "Let him in," he said slowly. As the gate opened, Amarachi felt her chest tighten, for reasons she could not yet explain. A man stepped into the courtyard, holding a worn photograph in his hand. His eyes scanned the mansion, not with anger, but with a heavy, practiced grief. He stopped when he saw Amarachi. Their eyes met, and recognition struck them both like a quiet bell. The photograph trembled slightly in his grip. Inside the house, Ifunanya felt the walls closing in. She knew that look. She had seen it once before, long ago, and buried it beneath years of wealth and denial. Chinedu lifted the photograph. "I've come," he said calmly, "to see the woman who ruined my sister's life." The words echoed across the courtyard, settling into the cracks that had already begun to spread. The courtyard seemed to shrink around Chinedu Okorie as he stood there, the photograph held carefully between his fingers, like something fragile that had already broken once. The breeze lifted the edges of the picture, but he steadied it with his thumb. His face showed no anger, only a fatigue that suggested he had been walking toward this moment for a very long time. Ifunanya Balogun did not move. Her feet were planted, her spine stiff, her mind racing faster than her body could follow. She had imagined this day in fragments, in dreams that ended before faces became clear. She had always believed distance and time would keep it from ever becoming real. Adekunle stepped forward slowly. "Sir," he said, measured and polite, "you're on private property. Perhaps we should talk inside." Chinedu looked at him, then nodded once. That's fine. I didn't come to shout. That alone unsettled Adekunle. He had prepared himself for rage, for accusations thrown like stones. Calm grief was far more dangerous. Inside the living room, the staff hovered at the edges, pretending to work while listening with their whole bodies. Amarachi stood near the doorway, her heart beating so loudly she was sure others could hear it. The moment Chinedu had stepped through the gate, something inside her had tightened with certainty she didn't yet understand. Chinedu did not sit when offered a seat. He placed the photograph gently on the center table instead. It showed a young woman with tired eyes and a soft smile. Her face was thin, but hopeful. "My sister," he said quietly. "Ngozi Okorie." Amarachi inhaled sharply before she could stop herself. Mama Sade turned toward her immediately. "You know her?" Amarachi nodded, tears already forming. "She used to come to our village," she said softly. "She helped my mother once, with medicine." The room stilled. Adekunle felt the air change. This was no longer a distant story. The lines were connecting. Ifunanya finally found her voice. "I don't know what this is about," she said too quickly. "People lie for money all the time." Chinedu looked at her then. "Properly. I didn't come for money," he said. "I came because silence didn't save my sister, and it won't save anyone else." He turned to Adekunle. "She worked here, years ago. She was young. She sent every naira home. She believed endurance was the price of survival." Amarachi's knees weakened. Endurance. The word echoed painfully. "She called me one night," Chinedu continued. "She said she couldn't breathe anymore, that she was afraid. I told her to come home." His voice wavered for the first time. He steadied it. "She never made it." Ifunanya shook her head. "I didn't kill anyone." "No," Chinedu agreed. "You didn't touch her the day she died." The pause that followed felt endless. "She ran," he said, "after another beating. She ran into the road behind this estate. A truck didn't stop in time." A sharp sound escaped Amarachi's throat. She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Mama Sade closed her eyes. Adekunle felt as though the floor beneath him had tilted. He turned slowly toward Ifunanya. "Is this true?" Ifunanya's face crumpled, not into guilt, but into fear. "I was young," she said. "I didn't know she would." "Stop," Mama Sade said firmly. The word landed with authority. "You knew," she continued. "You always knew. That was why your father paid. That was why the case disappeared." Chief Oladipo Balogun, who had been standing quietly near the doorway, finally stepped forward. The years sat heavily on his shoulders. "It's enough," he said hoarsely. Adekunle turned to him, stunned. "You knew?" Chief Balogun lowered his head. "I thought I was protecting my child." Chinedu laughed softly, without humor. "You were protecting her future, not her soul." Ifunanya sank into a chair, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "I've changed," she whispered. "I swear I have." Adekunle looked at her, really looked at her. He saw not just the woman he loved, but the pattern Mama Sade had warned about. Control, denial, silence, bought with fear. Amarachi stepped forward without realizing she was moving. "She said the same things," she said quietly. Nosy did. She said if she endured, it would pass. Ifunanya flinched. Adekunle's chest tightened painfully. This was the lowest point, the moment where love fought truth, where walking away felt like tearing something vital from his own body. "If you loved me," Ifunanya said desperately, "you wouldn't let this destroy us." The room waited. Adekunle closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something in him had hardened not into cruelty, but into clarity. "Love doesn't hide bodies," he said softly. The silence that followed was absolute. Ifunanya's phone slipped from her trembling hand and clattered onto the marble floor. No one moved. Mama Sad looked down at it, then back at Ifunanya. "Unlock it," she said. Ifunanya shook her head, sobbing. "Please, unlock it." Her hand hovered over the screen, hesitating, shaking. Adekunle watched, heart pounding. knowing that whatever lay behind that glass would end the life he thought he was building. Ifunanya pressed her thumb to the phone. The screen lit up, and in that glow, every lie she had wrapped herself in began to burn away. The phone's glow felt too bright for the room. Notifications stacked over one another, messages half hidden but unmistakable. Adekunle leaned forward before he realized he had moved, his breath shallow, his eyes fixed on the screen as though it might look back at him. Ifunanya sobbed quietly, her shoulders folding inward. "Kunle, please," she whispered. "You don't need to read everything." Mama Sade did not raise her voice. "He needs to read enough." Adekunle picked up the phone. His fingers were steady in a way that surprised him. He scrolled once. Then again, messages between Ifunanya and an unfamiliar contact. Voice notes, dates, plans. He tapped one recording. Ifunanya's voice filled the room, casual and confident. "Once the wedding is done, everything is legal. He trusts me. I'll move the properties into joint control. If he resists, I have the hospital recording. Men like him never want their mother's past exposed." Adekunle felt the words hit him physically, like a hand pressing against his chest. She paused. The room waited. Another message played. "Just be patient. After the marriage, he won't have a choice." Adekunle lowered the phone slowly. The man he had been careful, hopeful, accommodating stood at a distance now, watching what remained of his certainty collapse. He looked at Ifunanya. "You recorded my mother?" he said quietly. Ifunanya covered her face. "I didn't use it," she cried. "I never used it." "But you planned to," he replied. Chief Balogun took a step forward, his voice trembling. "Ifunanya." She snapped her head up. "You taught me to survive," she said sharply. "You taught me that power protects." Adekunle felt something shift inside him. This was not confusion anymore. This was understanding. He turned to Chinedu. "The case," he said. "You said it was never closed." Chinedu nodded. "It was buried," he replied. "Not closed." Adekunle inhaled slowly. He looked around the room, the staff standing frozen, Amarachi's tear-streaked face, Mama Sade's unwavering gaze. Every choice he had postponed now demanded an answer. He faced Ifunanya fully. "I loved you," he said. "I defended you when silence felt easier. But love that requires cruelty to survive is not love." Ifunanya shook her head violently. "You're abandoning me." "No," he said. "I'm refusing to disappear." She reached for him, desperation breaking through control. He stepped back. The distance mattered. Adekunle turned toward the guards.
I can't believe you did this.
"Call the police."
I'm calling the police.
The words landed with finality. Ifunanya screamed then, a raw sound that tore through the room. "Kunle, don't do this!" He did not answer. Mama Sade closed her eyes briefly. The room waited. When the officers arrived, their presence felt heavier than the walls. Questions were asked. Statements taken. Chinedu handed over documents he had carried folded close to his body for years. Chief Balogun spoke quietly, his shoulders bowed under the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. Ifunanya was handcuffed. As they led her away, she turned once more toward Adekunle. "I could have been better," she whispered. He met her gaze. "You chose not to be." The doors closed behind her. Silence followed, not the fearful silence of before, but something cleaner, uncertain, real. Adekunle exhaled, a long breath he hadn't known he'd been holding for years. He turned toward Amarachi. "You stopped it," he said. "Not just the slap. Everything that would have followed." Amarachi shook her head. "I was just tired of being quiet." He nodded slowly, understanding that quiet had cost too much already. Outside, sirens faded into the distance. Inside, the house stood changed, not healed, but awake. And for the first time, power no longer belonged to the loudest voice in the room. It belonged to the truth that had finally been spoken. Morning arrived without ceremony. No raised voices, no hurried footsteps, just sunlight stretching slowly across the marble floors, exposing corners the night had hidden. The mansion felt unfamiliar in its quiet, as though it were learning how to breathe again. Adekunle stood alone on the balcony, watching Lagos wake up beyond the gates. Traffic hummed in the distance. Life continued, indifferent to the collapse that had happened within these walls. That indifference steadied him. It reminded him that endings were not the center of the world, choices were. Behind him, the housekeeper cleared her throat softly before speaking. "Sir, breakfast is ready." He nodded. "Thank you." Downstairs, the staff gathered around the dining table for the first time without tension, nodding their shoulders. No one rushed. No one whispered. It was subtle, but Amarachi noticed it immediately. The way people sat straighter, the way they met each other's eyes. She paused. For the first time since arriving in Lagos, she did not feel like she was waiting for something bad to happen. Adekunle entered the room and everyone stood instinctively. He raised a hand. "Please," he said gently. "Sit." They hesitated, then obeyed. The act itself felt revolutionary. "I won't pretend yesterday didn't happen," he continued. "But I want to be clear about what happens next." The room waited. "There will be investigations," he said, "and changes. Anyone who wants to leave will be supported. Anyone who stays will be treated with respect. This house will not be a place of fear again." A murmur moved through the room, quiet but hopeful. After breakfast, Amarachi was summoned to the sitting room. Her stomach tightened despite herself. Old habits died slowly. Adekunle stood when she entered. "You're not in trouble," he said immediately, as if reading her thoughts. She nodded, hands clasped tightly. "I spoke to my lawyer," he continued, "and to a doctor. Your mother's treatment, consider it handled." Amarachi's breath caught. "Sir, this isn't charity," he said gently. "It's responsibility." Tears spilled freely now. She bowed her head, overwhelmed by gratitude and something deeper, validation. Later that afternoon, Chinedu returned to the mansion briefly. He looked lighter, though grief still lined his face. Justice had begun, but healing would take longer. He stood near the gate, looking back at the house once more. "I didn't think I'd ever feel finished," he said to Adekunle. Adekunle nodded. "Some endings don't give relief," he replied. "They give space." Chinedu looked toward Amarachi, who stood a few steps behind. "She reminds me of my sister," he said softly. "Not in weakness, in courage." Amarachi swallowed hard. Before leaving, Chinedu pressed the photograph of Ngozi into Adekunle's hand. "She deserves to be remembered," he said. Adekunle accepted it carefully. She will be. Days passed. The mansion changed in small, deliberate ways. Meetings were held, contracts revised, staff quarters renovated. Silence was replaced not with noise, but with conversation. Chief Oladipo Balogun visited once, briefly. He looked older, smaller. He apologized not with excuses, but with humility. Adekunle listened. Forgiveness did not come easily, but it came honestly. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Amarachi stood in the courtyard sweeping leaves that had fallen from the old almond tree. Adekunle approached quietly. "You know," he said, "you could leave. Start fresh somewhere else." She smiled faintly. "I know. Why stay?" She thought for a moment. "Because this place is learning," she said. "And so am I." He nodded, understanding that courage did not always mean walking away. Sometimes it meant standing and reshaping what remained. As night settled, the mansion lights glowed softly, no longer harsh, no longer intimidating, just light. Amarachi looked up at the windows, remembering the raised hand, the stopped wrist, the moment that changed everything. She felt no pride, only quiet resolve. Silence had once protected cruelty. Now, it protected healing. And in that transformation, every life touched by the truth began slowly, carefully to move forward. In the weeks that followed, the mansion became a different kind of home, not perfect, not free of pain, but honest. Justice did not erase the past, yet it loosened its grip on the present. Adekunle learned that love must be brave enough to confront truth. Amarachi learned that courage does not announce itself. It simply acts when silence becomes too heavy to carry. And the house itself, once a monument to fear, became a place where voices mattered. Healing did not arrive loudly. It arrived quietly, like morning light, asking only to be allowed in. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel as we grow this community step by step. And don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I truly appreciate every one of you.